Hi everyone, Rob here in post-production. Unfortunately, we had some audio issues while recording this episode, which affected my voice particularly. We've done our best to clean up the audio, but there may still be a few areas where it sounds a little bit rough. We hope that that doesn't affect your enjoyment of the episode too much.
Hello, and welcome to Awkward Double Bills, a podcast in which a cinephile and a genre fan try to broaden each other's cinematic horizons, one film at a time. Each episode, we'll be discussing two films, one chosen by me, Matt Schaefer,
and one chosen by me, Rob Takizawa Lowe. In this episode, we'll be discussing Jean-Luc Godard's Contempt from 1963 and Dario Argento's Deep Red from 1975. We'll talk about what the films were trying to do, what we think of them, and try to see them through each other's eyes. These discussions will be filled with spoilers, so please keep that in mind before listening.
At the end of the episode, we'll try and figure out how the two movies could possibly work together as an awkward double bill.
Okay, so before we get to today's discussions, Matt, what have you been watching, consuming recently?
Not much. The World Cup's over, but it's also been the end of the semester for me, so busy time of grading and kind of wrapping stuff up. The only bit of content I thought I could talk about is a podcast. One of my favorite podcasts is a comedy podcast. It's called Bananas for Bonanza. Have you heard of this?
I think you've told me about it before. Was it like a review show of the TV show Bonanza or something like that?
It is, yes. So each episode, the two hosts plus a guest will have watched an episode of Bonanza, the classic Western from the 50s, maybe. I think it lasts a long time, 50s, maybe through to the 70s, and discuss it. It's hosted by Dalton Wilcox, Poet Laureate of the West, and Mutt Taylor, who's a Western musician.
I was going to say, sounds like a Western musician.
Yeah. Well, they're both characters played by comedians. Dalton Wilcox is played by a comedian called Andy Daly, who often does characters, but just one of those inherently very, very funny people.
How do you make an interesting show about an old Western? And how do you make it last?
Well, I think Bonanza was something like 412 episodes, something like that. And so after the 10th episode, they started making the joke where, can't believe it. We've only got, 402 episodes left of this show to go. Yeah. So they're very kind of extreme characters. They're both sort of idiots, but love the show Bonanza. But they also have guests, and the guest is usually playing it straight. And so they're kind of bouncing off that. And so the basic premise is that they love the show Bonanza and they think it's the greatest show ever. But the underlying understanding of the audience and the guest and everybody is that it's a really terrible show.
Okay.
So basically they're making fun of it.
There's a lot of podcasts where people do like those kind of, watch along reviews of, shows from the 90s and things like that. And I never really got the appeal.
Me neither, no. And so this is basically a parody of those kind of shows.
Okay, well, I could probably get the appeal of that, get behind that.
Yeah. And one of the other running jokes is that they can't believe nobody else has jumped on the Bonanza bandwagon of reviewing it episode by episode.
Yeah, well, it's a hot topic. Yeah.
So how about you? What have you been watching?
I've got through a few things. I finished reading a book called Human Beasts, The Films of Paul Naschy. So I've talked on the podcast a few times about Paul Naschy, the Spanish Lon Chaney. And yeah, this is a book which sort of gives a biographical sketch and then goes through each of his films in really excruciating detail. And then it has like some extra information. There's an interview with him and all that kind of thing. And yeah, I thought it was very interesting. Lots of information, too much information, really, more than you need. But I did find there's a lot of his films that I haven't seen and that aren't available and that I'm looking forward to some boutique Blu-ray company putting out so I can waste my hard-earned money on them. So yeah, finished reading that. I saw a movie called The Devil's Nightmare. It's like a French movie from 1971, which was rather good. It was one of the very few movies from the sort of 70s, 80s that I found actually quite disturbing. And it came entirely down to one performance, which was very, very good, very sort of unhinged.
The Devil's Nightmare presumably would be paradise.
Well, I think this is more a nightmare created by the devil as opposed to the nightmare of the devil.
I see. Okay.
Yeah. The Devil's Nightmare might be like an even worse hell where, I don't know, that's not what they do.
It would be the opposite, wouldn't it? It would be heaven.
Well, the devil wants to go back to heaven, right? Because he was kicked out. Lucifer was kicked out after rebelling against God. And then he's in hell. And he's having a grand old time, but he wants to go back to heaven, right? Like, he doesn't like being in hell. I don't know. I'm not off the. So yeah, That was pretty good. I rewatched Jennifer's Body, the Megan Fox film. Have you seen that?
No, I don't think so. I always confused it with, when it came out, to me, it seemed like not a ripoff, but basically I always confused it with Boxing Helena.
Okay.
The Jennifer Lynch movie. Is that right?
Sure. I haven't seen it, but sure.
Okay. Boxing Helena, not a boxing movie. Yeah.
What's it about?
I believe it's about amputating all of Helena's limbs and putting her in a box.
Okay. Yeah, sounds good. But she wouldn't be able to engage in any boxing after that. She wouldn't have any to punch with.
Make her an easy opponent.
Yeah. Do you think they do like a YouTube version called Unboxing Helena?
Yes.
Yeah, Jennifer's Body I thought was pretty good. And it actually read slightly differently watching it in a sort of post-Me Too era, because it's all about, a woman who's sort of taken advantage of by men who are kind of rock stars. And yeah, I thought that was kind of an interesting how the cultural shift affected how I sort of understood the film. So yeah, I'd recommend revisiting it to anyone who's listening. There's two more films that I watched. One is a Lucio Fulci film from 1969, so kind of an older film of his, called One on Top of the Other, which is also known as Perversion Story, which is a giallo. So, quite suitable for one of today's films. Yeah, I thought it was pretty good. It was very different from the other Fulcis that I've seen. There's not a lot of gore. We still do get a lot of close-ups on eyes, reflections in mirrors, like one person's talking to the camera and the other character is shown in the mirror behind them as they have a conversation, that kind of thing. So a lot of Fulci's trademarks on display. I think it's kind of a transitional period where he was moving from more kind of, mainstream cinema, comedies, that kind of thing, into, the more sort of horror subgenre. And he went on to make a couple of other giallos, but this one was very different to those as well. So it was a sort of a curiosity. The last one that I wanted to talk about was Crimson, The Man with the Severed Head, which is a 1973 film starring Paul Naschy, which is about a man who is a criminal and he's in a bank robbery that goes wrong, and he gets shot in the head, and then he gets a head transplant, and then he goes crazy like a Frankenstein's monster, and it's rubbish. It's really bad. Even for Naschy completists like me, it's not worth checking out.
So can I ask what makes it bad?
It's very padded. Like, there were 2 extended dance sequences for almost no reason, just to get it up to like 90 minutes. The performances are all ridiculous, and it's all with this English dub, which is just the most disinterested dub that I've ever heard. None of the lines make sense. Like, they sound like they've been, translated directly from Spanish. And so you get like these really unnatural phrases and stuff. It's kind of funny sometimes. And the story doesn't really make any sense, and there isn't any suspense. And even like the final rampage where, Naschy gets to be the crazy Frankenstein monster, it's an hour into the film. And once it starts, it's not really got anywhere to go. Like, it's not very exciting. It's not very interesting. So there's nothing really to recommend, I would say. If you like Paul Naschy, then Paul Naschy's in it, but he's unconscious for the first hour of the film. So there's not really a lot there for even Naschy fans to latch on to. So yeah, not great, unfortunately.
I'm sure there's plenty of good Naschy out there still for you.
The stuff that is available, I've seen nearly all of it. I own something like 22 of his films on Blu-ray.
Okay.
But there are a bunch of other films which are just not available. Yeah, like he did one about called The Transsexual in the early 70s, which is apparently like a very interesting and sort of sympathetic portrait of a transsexual. It's like a sort of drama, not a horror. And he made a few other films like that. He made one that was based on the Patty Hearst case. And yeah, there just seem to be a few interesting bits and pieces out there that you simply can't get hold of, unfortunately.
Bientôt. Sur 7 écrans.
Based on a novel by Alberto Moravia, 1963's Contempt is perhaps the closest Jean-Luc Godard ever came to making a Hollywood film. With US funding, American producers, star of countless blockbusters Jack Palance, and one of the most famous women in the world at the time, Brigitte Bardot. However, it's also undoubtedly a Godard film, recognizable through its focus on a difficult romantic relationship and its hyper self-awareness as a piece of cinema. Set on the set of a film version of The Odyssey, directed by Fritz Lang, playing himself, and in constant tension with an American producer of his own, its central story is of a screenwriter, his wife, and their disintegrating marriage. So let's begin our discussion of Contempt.
Avec Jacques Palance, Georges Gabol et Fritz Lang.
Okay, so Matt, this is your choice. You cinephile, you. Why did you choose this film?
So I'd only seen this film once before, probably about 20 years ago or so. And at the time, I had only seen maybe a couple of other Godard films. And I didn't really watch it sort of as part of the, Godard oeuvre, as it were. But I remember it staying with me after I'd watched it, thinking about it for a lot after I'd watched it. And especially the sort of center, the middle third, very long scene between the married couple. And it felt like didn't feel like any other film I'd ever seen. And I just remember appreciating it quite a lot at the time. One thing I've noticed as we're recording these episodes is, when I'm rewatching films that I've watched before, the films that I've chosen, I am to an extent kind of watching it a little bit with you in mind, watching it and imagining how you're reacting to it. So I guess my opening question to you is, how much contempt do you have for Contempt?
None at all. I really liked it.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Interesting.
Yeah. I didn't perceive this to be a middle-class people talking about the middle-class problems kind of film.
Well, my other opening question was that this feels like maybe upper middle-class people talking about also unrelatable problems. But okay, I'm happy to hear you liked it. What did you like about it?
Well, so first of all, I liked seeing Jack Palance in it because I've only seen him in one other film, which is the 1974 version of Bram Stoker's Dracula, where he played Dracula. And I didn't like that, and I didn't think he was very good in it. But I thought he was very good in this. I really liked his sort of slimy, smarmy producer, frisbeeing the reels across the room, that kind of thing. I thought that was great. I like the locations, actually. That was one thing I kind of felt like during the film, I was just sort of being bathed in this sort of warm light all the time. And it reminded me of going on holidays to France, and just experiencing that kind of atmosphere and that kind of weather. I really like the locations, like the big building with the stairs that go all the way up to the roof, and the people sort of, lying around on the top of it. I really like the whole I don't know what you'd call it, the whole vibe of the film.
The mood. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I liked that the entire story was very, very simple. And my basic understanding of the story is it's a story about a wife getting the ick for her husband. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
She, at the start, they love each other, and she's saying, "What do you love about me?" And he's going, "Oh, I like your feet, I like your hair, I like your earlobes," that kind of thing. And then there's just that moment where she's getting in the car with Jack Palance, and he says, "Yeah, you're going ahead," and she gets the ick, and the whole film is her ick building up until she can't stand the guy anymore. And she sort of engineers a situation where he will catch her, in a compromising position with Jack Palance, and then she can leave him and die.
Yeah. So yeah, there's definitely that moment early on. At the time, it feels significant, and it turns out to be very significant when Palance's Prokosh, I think is his name, the American producer, asks her to go in the car with him, and the husband just sort of, but she keeps looking back. She keeps, she's waiting for him to say, "No, you can't, don't go off alone with this creep." And he never does. There's also, there's that, and then there's also her catching him, giving a little tap on the behind of the assistant to the producer. And in that long middle part that I was talking about, when they're just in their apartment, it seems to go on forever. It does go on for a long time, and it plays out in real time, or like at least it feels like that. And they move around the rooms, and the conversation kind of goes in and out of argument, and sometimes gets a bit more domestic. And at one point, she changes clothes, and she comes in, and she's wearing a wig, and she's acting like nothing has happened. But then quickly, it's obvious that she's still harboring these doubts. And I don't know how many times he asks her, "Do you love me? Do you still love me?" And she's very non-committal, and then she says no, and then she, kind of prevaricates a little bit. And, he asks, is it because you saw what I did with Francesca?
Yeah.
And she never gives him a straight answer. But to me, it did feel like in the end, it was because of the way that he kind of, well, actually, I was going to ask you that. I think it is that. I think it's him maybe using her a little bit to curry favor with the producer. The producer's his boss.
Yeah.
And he's a playwright, but he needs the money from writing this script. Did you get, what also comes up a bit in their discussion is this idea that he's doing it just for the money and he's sold out a little bit. And maybe she's lost a bit of respect for him.
That was my takeaway, is that basically she's started to see him as kind of weak, not willing to fight for his artistic, vision, and not willing to fight for her. And that was, to me, what the meaning of the film was. It was about contempt. Like, the ick that she developed was basically contempt for him. Whereas maybe before she felt sort of some kind of admiration. It seems to me that she developed this feeling of contempt, but it wasn't like through some big grand thing. It was just a series of small things that compounded over the course of the film, that led to her, eventually realizing, I don't like this guy anymore. That was my understanding.
Yeah, I think so. And it's interesting because the film it feels like it takes place just over 2 or 3 days, maybe. But there is this big shift. They go from, like you said at the beginning, seeming very much in love to her basically leaving him by the end. I was
wondering your kind of take on that, because she does change her mind about him very quickly. And in some ways, the stuff about him letting her go off with the producer, now, reading that through sort of a modern lens, you would think he would be seen possibly as a more negative character if he'd said, no, you're not allowed to go there, you must stay with me. Like, it seems more progressive that he trusts her enough to let her go off with the producer, and that he's allowing her to, do things out of his sight and all that kind of thing. It's, he's not controlling her. So there was that. And then also, he is someone who needs money. And again, in the kind of modern world, artists are often struggling and having to do things that they don't particularly want to do in order to make ends meet. And I was wondering, like, is the film really commenting on him, or is it commenting on her? Because I think you could read it as, from her perspective, he has, he's failed in certain ways, and it's caused her to change her perspective of him. But from another perspective, is she being presented as sort of quite mercurial and difficult, and changing her mind very, very suddenly? What was your sort of feeling about that? And is my understanding there being colored by seeing it through a modern lens?
Yeah, I guess 2 possibilities. Yeah, one is that we are just looking at it from a modern lens, and that maybe at the time, even for an artist like Godard, the way the story is told, the right thing for him to do would not let his wife go off with this creepy guy, because she's his wife, and he should have stronger control over her. But for me, like, I have a different perspective, right? I mean, that's not the reading I would take. For me, I think it's less about him letting her go and more about him almost kind of offering his wife to her, to the producer.
That was something I wanted to ask as well, like, because you mentioned that before. At what point do you interpret him offering his wife to the producer? Because I didn't really see that, and maybe I missed it.
Yeah, maybe offering her is a bit too strong. But maybe, throughout the film, he goes back and forth whether or not he wants to do the film, whether or not he, and how he feels about the producer. Like, he clearly doesn't like the producer. He's clearly not somebody he wants to work with. But he does have this thing where he, the money obviously plays a part, and they have this nice apartment that he can pay for, because he's doing the film.
Yeah.
So yeah, maybe not necessarily like saying, here, you take my wife. Maybe not that directly, or
please,
right. But maybe just sort of going along with whatever he wants. If he wants to drive alone with the wife, you drive alone with my wife. That's fine. And maybe it's less about the fact that it's his wife and he should be more protective of her, or make the decisions about what she does, and more about, I don't know. It's tricky though, because obviously, once she does say to him that she doesn't love him, that seems to destroy him. He can't really handle it. It seems such an important thing to him, and maybe it's just he didn't think that was possible, and so it's come as a shock. And he thought that maybe she should play along, she should flirt with the producer a little bit because this is a job that's important to both of them. But I think, for me, it's all kind of the same thing, which is it comes down to this idea that he has sold out in a way. He has sort of given up some of his artistic ambitions to do the film. He doesn't even seem that upset when he does see her kissing him.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's what I meant when I said, like, she's got the ick. I think my understanding was less about, she's disgusted that he's, kind of trying to use her to get ahead, and more just, she's seen him for what he is, which is someone who's, just not got the passion, not got the vision, or not willing to stand up for his work or for his wife in the way that she thinks that he should. So that was my reading, but yeah, I was just wondering whether there is a sort of a reading again of her just being difficult.
Yeah, I never felt like the film was trying to present her as the one being difficult. Even when she's being, vague and evasive and not being direct with him and kind of playing games with him a little bit. To me, the film seemed to be saying she was justified in doing all that. At one point he slaps her. He gets a little bit rough with her, and I don't know, maybe that justifies her behavior. It justifies her behavior in terms of she's right to realize that she shouldn't be with this guy. But I always felt like, I don't know about taking sides necessarily, but yeah, I never thought the film was criticizing her necessarily for the way she behaved.
Okay. Yeah, that's fair enough.
The other thing I wanted to talk about with this, though, is the sort of the general conceit of it taking place during a film shoot. And like I mentioned in the introduction, the sort of its self-awareness as a piece of cinema, and I think, like a lot of Godard's film, maybe saying something about cinema. It starts with, if you remember, like the beginning is interesting. It's a film of the 60s, so like a lot of films of the day, the credits were at the beginning of the film, and they were spoken by a narrator. And then when the narrator finished telling us the credits, he then kind of went into narrating the film a little bit. And he started with this quote by André Bazin, who was a film critic like Godard was, and also a filmmaker. And he said, "Cinema substitutes our gaze for a world more in harmony with our desires." And then basically said, that's what this film is going to be about, more or less. And even while he's saying that, we're seeing a shot of a film set, basically a film shoot with a camera on a track and getting the shot. So yeah, I just wondered what your thoughts were about this general self-awareness that the film seems to have of cinema, and maybe if it's trying to say something about cinema.
I wasn't sure really if it was trying to say that much about cinema as an art form. I thought it was trying to say something more about cinema as a business, because you get these clashing creative visions, and you get the American producer, the money man, who's trying to sort of impose his vision on the artists who are actually making the film, and you have these back and forth between him and Lang, who we should talk about. And that also seems to be a comment not just on cinema as a business, but just on kind of American-European relations. Sort of the geopolitics in a way. So yeah, that was kind of what I saw more as the focus in terms of the filmmaking side of it and the context of the story. Not so much the sort of the art of filmmaking itself, because I don't know that we saw that much of that. What did you see in there?
I agree with you, definitely. It is there's a lot of stuff about the business side of making films, and there's a very sort of the part of the sort of backstory of the whole film is, as I mentioned, this was, I think, the only time he got funding. He got money from America to make a film. And he did have these American producers, and ironically had a lot of arguments with his American producers. And they wanted, when they saw the first cut, actually, they complained that there weren't enough nude scenes of Brigitte Bardot, because they realized that would be a selling point. And actually, that opening scene where they're in bed and he's talking about how much he likes the different parts of her body, Godard went and shot that afterwards to add it in, to say, right, here you go, here's your nude shot of Bardot. So I think there is definitely that, and Godard plays the assistant director to Fritz Lang, so he's in it himself. But I think there's also something there about, what very early on, it might even still be that opening little bit where we see them shooting stuff. the camera turns and points directly at the audience. So the camera that Lang is using to make his film, we see it point directly at us. I'm not quite sure what that means. Maybe we can try and tease it out. I guess there's the other thing to say, which is that Fritz Lang is making a version of the Odyssey.
It's very topical.
Very topical. There is famously a Cyclops in the Odyssey, which maybe that, and some people have tried to figure out how this film, Contempt, is Godard's version of the Odyssey, and saying how Paul is Odysseus and Camille is Penelope and that kind of stuff. I'm not sure about that. I mean, I don't know the Odyssey well enough, but it seems it might be a bit of a stretch. But I think in that reading, the camera itself is the Cyclops.
Yeah, I haven't read the Odyssey. I'm reading the Iliad at the moment. I didn't even know that Christopher Nolan was making the Odyssey.
Okay.
But I saw an Instagram reel where a guy was like singing the ancient Greek version of the Iliad, and I thought, oh, that sounds really cool. And it was just one of those moments where it's like, oh, inspiration. I'll buy that and read it. So I bought the Iliad, and then it turned out that Christopher Nolan was making the Odyssey, and oh, okay, that's good. Just a bit of serendipity, a bit of cultural serendipity. And then this film, of course.
And then
also, did you choose this film because it had the Odyssey in, and the Odyssey's just come out? Or?
No, not at all. To be honest, I'd forgotten about the whole Odyssey connection when I chose it.
There you go.
Yeah,
no such thing as coincidence, except in this case.
Yeah. I mean, I guess the other thing to say is the maybe somewhat autobiographical nature of the film.
Mm-hmm.
So apparently Godard told people or said that this film was sort of meant to be like a letter directed to his wife at the time, Anna Karenina, who also she was an actress, and she was in quite a few of his films. I mean, I can't imagine he was able to kind of think of this or conceive this or create it as it was happening. But as I said, this was the only film he ever made with American money and with American producers. And from what I understand about the type of person Godard is, I'm sure he felt very, very conflicted about that, and never did it again, which tells us something, and never made anything close to a Hollywood film. Actually, later on he did make films with Hollywood actors, but very much using them in a specific way. So you could read the film as him anticipating or worrying or fearing about what his wife would think about him making this type of film. And so putting Camille, the Brigitte Bardot character, sort of in that position. And again, presenting her as being fully justified to have those ideas. And him as Paul, just having these doubts and maybe making the wrong decision in the end. I think, I know, there's potentially something there.
I think it's a strange letter to write to your wife. Quite self-implicating.
Yeah. Well, like I said, it is based on a novel, so the story was already there.
Sure.
But maybe just adding these elements, along the way.
Yeah. What did you think about the performances from each? Because I think I've never seen a Brigitte Bardot film, so I was curious to see, because I know her more as a cultural phenomenon, a bit of cultural stuff in the ether, not as a performer. So yeah, it was interesting to see her as a performer. What did you think about all the performances?
I think all the performances are great, especially her. To my understanding, also is this is the film that made people kind of take her seriously as an actress. I thought she was incredible in this. I thought everybody was good. Michel Piccoli, the actor who plays Paul, he's good. I don't know, he's something a little bit, maybe intentionally, a little bit kind of restrained about his performance. Even when he's getting very, very excited. But no, I like them all. And Fritz Lang playing himself, it's a good performance, but it's kind of the performance you often get from people playing themselves, presenting them in a sort of an ideal version of themselves.
Yeah.
But a lot of fun to see it like that.
Yeah, I'd never seen Fritz Lang before. I've seen a lot of Fritz Lang films, mainly his kind of silent films, and like M and things like that. But I'd never seen him, so it was quite nice to see the man himself in the flesh.
Yes. Yeah.
I agree. I think all of the performers were very good. The guy playing Paul, like I said, I think the restrained element of it was intentional. I think that, if the whole idea is that she's got some growing contempt for him because of his lack of passion, then that comes through in the performance. He comes through as sort of a little bit resigned, a little bit surrendering to the world around him. So I thought that part of the performance fits the themes of the film quite well. And I thought Brigitte Bardot was great. Very, very good.
Okay, maybe final. I think, like I said, I think there's a lot more to say about this, but I think it'll I think make for interesting discussion when we look at the two films together. But maybe just the last thing for now is, what did you think of the ending?
Yeah, I was surprised. I wasn't sure what the point of the ending was. I mean, basically, her and Prokofiev drive off together, and then they get hit by like a tractor or something, and they die, right? So I don't know, maybe that's part of the Odyssey or something. I don't know, but like, it seemed to me like I don't know. Was it like meant to be a punishment for the two of them, or was it meant to be a punishment for Paul, or was it just kind of like the punchline to the setup? I didn't really understand what was going on there. Did you have a theory about it?
Yeah, not really. I feel the same. I didn't quite get it. It didn't feel like the kind of film that would, punish characters for, having an affair or that kind of thing. And it didn't feel like the film wanted to punish her necessarily. I mean, your idea of, punishing him, perhaps, I guess he'd already decided to quit the film. So Prokofiev dying wouldn't really mean anything to him, but I guess her dying would.
As I recall, he doesn't have much of a reaction to it. So maybe it's just meant to kind of highlight his complacency and his lack of passion.
But do we see his reaction to it?
I don't remember it, so maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe I can't remember.
I couldn't, it's left, I think it's left ambiguous at the end whether or not they know. We do go back to the villa, and the assistant Francesca, she kind of acts like she might know because she looks a little worried, but she doesn't say anything to Paul. And he goes back up to the rooftop of that villa in Capri to watch them shooting a final shot, or to say goodbye to Lang, I guess. Is that after the car crash? So I don't think he knows yet.
Oh, really? I thought he did. I thought,
maybe he does. But if he does, like you say, he was very casual about it.
Listeners will tell us.
Yes. Yeah. I'm not sure what to make of it. I mean, well, okay. I guess here's an idea. Maybe there is the when they end that argument and she rushes out of the house, he gets a gun out of the bookcase and he takes a gun. There's a gun on the shelf, and he takes it out, he puts it in his pocket. He jumps in the car with her, and the gun does show up later. At one point she says, "Oh, here's your gun. I found it on the boat. I took the bullets out." So, I mean, this is the opposite of Chekhov's gun, right? This is a gun that we meet at the end of Act 2, and never goes off. The bullets get taken out of it, which would be the opposite of what probably, his Hollywood producers would want or expect. And a tragic car crash, killing Brigitte Bardot at the end, and Jack Palance in a convertible. Maybe that's his, it's the only thing I can think of, but maybe that's his sort of, oh, here's your little Hollywood scene, or here's a little tragic ending for you, just to make it feel like, you're getting your money's worth. I don't know.
Yeah, if that's what it's meant to be, it almost comes across as sarcastic, and maybe that's what was intended.
Yeah.
So it's so anticlimactic. It's like they drive off and then bang, they got hit by a tractor, and now they're dead.
Yes. Yeah. And again, from what I know about Godard, that might track.
Well, yeah, I thought it was a really engaging little film. I don't know why. Obviously, this is about, like you said, upper middle class people and their problems. But I found this more interesting than some of the others. Perhaps because when you're in a relationship that's kind of fraying, right, and falling apart, and you're not quite sure why, and you're sort of talking about it but not talking about it, and you're both kind of aware that it's happening, and like I've been in that position, right? And so this was all very familiar to me. So it was quite interesting with the kind of dynamics, seeing the dynamics between the characters. So maybe that was why I appreciated it. But yeah, I mean, I think the other thing was I just enjoyed being in the world with those people, and I liked, Jack Palance flouncing around being a smug bastard.
There's a scene early on when I think maybe when he first sees Camille. And he's almost like one of the prison guards in Scorpion Female Prisoner. Like just a close-up of him almost licking his lips, just like drooling at her.
Yeah. No, I thought he was great, actually. And I'd never really known much about Jack Palance. Like, I know the name. Again, he's a bit of sort of, he's in the cultural ether. And I'd seen him in the Dracula film, and he was fine. Like, he's not really Dracula material, you know. But in this, he was great, and he really, you know, showed himself to be a very good, very capable performer. So yeah,
I only really knew him from Shane and City Slickers, but I sort of did a little background reading on him, and I mean, like a lot of, you know, even big Hollywood actors, you know, he's an artist. He considered himself an artist, and I think he did paint and write poetry and write books and direct stuff. So you know, even those, you know, a lot of those Hollywood actors, you know, they had a certain look and they had to act a certain way. But at heart, they're still sort of sensitive artists.
yeah. I'm sure he enjoyed working with Godard
And slugging Brigitte Bardot.
Yeah, well, can you blame him?
Yeah.
I can feel death in this room.
Dario Argento helped popularize the giallo with his 1970 film The Bird with the Crystal Plumage, and arguably perfected the genre 5 years later with 1975's Deep Red, or Profondo Rosso. The film follows the pianist Marcus Daly, played by David Hemmings, who becomes entangled in a series of murders carried out by a black-gloved killer. Along the way, he develops a relationship with photojournalist Gianna Brezzi, played by Daria Nicolodi. Argento's eye-catching visual style, along with the memorable score composed by the Italian rock band Goblin, helped the film stand out in a crowded field, making it one of the most notable giallo films of all time. Let's get to our deep dive into Deep Red.
Okay, this was your choice, obviously, this week. So, Rob, why did you choose this film for me?
We've got to get to Argento. He's one of the big names in horror, in genre film, and particularly he's known for the giallo. And I think we've mentioned the giallo before. Are you familiar with giallo at all?
Generally speaking, yes. Yeah, basically Italian horror films.
Kind of. So they're based on but they're called giallo because it means yellow, obviously. And there was like a publisher, an Italian publisher, that produced kind of murder mystery novels, like Agatha Christie novels, and it had the publisher produced the books all with yellow covers. So these were called yellows, and then films that were based on these novels started being called yellows as well. So basically, primarily murder mystery kind of stories, but they developed a very sort of distinctive style. So they often had very complex names, very complex titles. So, you know, The Bird with the Crystal Plumage is one of Argento's films. We've also got Four Flies on Grey Velvet. Lucio Fulci made Lizard in a Woman's Skin and Don't Torture a Duckling. And then you get very, very ridiculous ones like the Red Queen Kills 7 Times. And my personal favorite, which I've mentioned before, Your Vice is a Locked Room and Only I Have the Key. So you get these very elaborate titles and very kind of tangled stories and plots that don't quite work when you try to tease them out. Like they're trying to wrong foot you constantly, and they're often just one or two twists too many for them to be plausible. And they tend to have a focus on the death scenes, which you'll have noticed in this film. So your traditional, murder mysteries, the murder isn't really the point; the mystery is the point. And in giallo films, the murder's the point, and the mystery is kind of this tangled plot, but it's really an engine for the kills, and for the spectacle. So that's kind of my understanding. And there's different types of giallo. Like you get certain ones with supernatural elements, like Suspiria is sometimes considered a giallo, although I don't really think it is. But the sort of prototypical giallo is something like Deep Red, where you've got this series of kills, of set pieces, and usually someone who's kind of stumbled into the situation trying to figure out what's happening. So yeah, I thought that this is a really good introduction to the giallo because it's probably one of the best giallos. We might look at some more later on, but I think this one has a story which is not too out there. It kind of makes sense when you think about it. It's got the great Dario Argento photography, the great look. It's got some really nice characters, and it's got the fantastic soundtrack. So I thought if it was gonna hook you on giallo, then this would be the best bet. What was your sort of first impression of Deep Red?
I'm not sure you've hooked me on the giallo, I'm afraid.
Oh no.
There's definitely things about this film that I liked, and maybe if I thought about it, like the thing that I don't like about it, maybe I've sort of outsized it a little bit in my mind and in my first watching and first impression of the film. And I would say I did like it more as it went on. And by the end, I was okay with it. Like halfway through, I thought, I really don't like this.
Okay.
But by the end, I was okay with it. I think maybe it was when I realized that it was like a mystery story rather than just a serial killer story. Like when I realized they were setting us up to, realize that we probably know who the killer is, and then we're going to get a reveal. That's why I liked it a little bit more. But in general, story-wise, I was okay with it. And well, I'd say one issue, which is, and I mean, obviously, it's all just personal, and this is just my own, my own little problems. It's me. It's not the film. I've never understood David Hemmings as as an actor or as a person who's made the lead of a film. I mean, I don't know. I've seen Blow Up, and I feel like I've seen him in a couple of other things, and I've never. For me, he just doesn't, I don't know, transmit or communicate the necessary qualities to be the leading role in a film. So that's a sort of, again, obviously just very personal. That's a strike against it for me. What I became aware of, so I think, I feel like maybe I have seen Suspiria, but so long ago that I don't remember it at all. I have little images that I kind of remember of it. But what I realized with Argento, and I don't know if this is how sort of typical this is of his film, but I assume it is that he puts the work in for sure. There's a lot of work that went into this film. You can clearly see that just in terms of the setups and getting close-ups and inserts and all these things. He knows what he's doing. He's planned everything out. He gets the shots that he needs to get. I mean, it felt like it would take a long time to make this film, and there was money behind it. But at the same time, to me, it almost felt like a student film that it had a lot of money behind it. Again, I'm sure I'm just missing a lot, or I just don't understand a lot of it. But there's so much sort of intentional camera movement and certain cuts and these like inserts and these close-ups and all these things. But for me, I just couldn't see the motivation behind a lot of the camera movement and a lot of the shots. It felt like it was trying to be arty just for the sake of being arty.
Okay.
And again, I'm happy to be proved wrong, because I'm sure there was something there, and it did mean something in terms of the overall film and what he's trying to do. But to me, it felt just kind of busy. And the other thing it made me think of was, I'll get all stuff I don't like about it out of the way. For sure, there is stuff I do like about it, and we can talk about that. One filmmaker reminded me of it, but maybe only in this way, is Iñárritu. He made Amores Perros, which is a film of his I do like, and he made Babel and The Revenant and Birdman. Yeah. And other than Amores Perros, I haven't liked any of his films. But that's just me. He's a one of the best regarded filmmakers currently working. For me, it's how much attention he calls to himself as the filmmaker, as the camera feels very self-conscious. Every time the camera moves, I'm aware of somebody making a decision to move the camera in that way. And I haven't quite figured out this idea of mine that I have, or this criticism I have, because when I watch a film that I appreciate, I do think, oh, that was a great camera movement, or that was a great cut. And so the fact that I'm aware of it sort of is the same thing. But I don't know why. Something about the way Iñárritu does it, and something that I notice about what Argento does in this film, something about the self-consciousness or the intentionality behind it kind of bothered me. And I'm sure I'm being unfair to both directors. Maybe it's because in this film, I just couldn't understand why sometimes the camera was moving in the way it was moving. That just made me think, oh, he's done that, but the way the scene is working, or for what it's trying to tell me, I don't know why he needed to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that maybe in the form of the giallo, it's a very self-conscious genre or subgenre in the first place, right? It calls attention to itself with those titles, with the kind of the focus on the the elaborate kill set pieces and things like that. It's a genre that is very style over substance a lot of the time. I've said before, Italian film of the period, especially Italian horror, did tend to focus on style over substance, because they thought, hey, we're doing film, it's a visual medium, let's give them a show, and I think that Argento, I agree, he does sometimes do like kind of showy camera work, but I kind of like it just for what it is. It's like, oh, he's doing the gimmick camera work. You know, the camera's spinning around the eye, and that's fine. It's just fun to watch. He does a lot of like the close-ups on like the record needle and the gloves and things like that. One thing that I find quite interesting about Argento's way of filming is that he's very detail focused, and he often focuses he focuses on things like shoes, you know, and random objects that I think he just finds interesting in the scene. And like you said, it's all very intentional. I think whatever he finds interesting, that's what he's focusing the camera on. And it's not really so much about conveying a particular, you know, message to the audience. It's just, I think this looks cool. I think it's an interesting item. I think it tells us maybe something about the characters, but for the most part, I think it's just, it looks cool. So why not have a good gander at it?
Yeah. I think that's where I got this idea of like a student film, where, you know, student films, they realize, oh, this will make a really cool shot. And so they get that shot, regardless of whether it's right for the story they're trying to tell.
Were there any particular shots that you thought were wrong for the story?
There's a scene early on, I think, when he's talking with Carlo, and they're walking outside, and then they walk and they stop, and there's a shot, and there's a kind of long perspective in the background, and there's like a few women kind of dotted at the back. And I thought it's an interesting shot, but I was trying to understand like what did it mean? Like, and what's going on in the background. There were some of the close-ups just felt sort of random to me, and yeah, just a close-up for the sake of a close-up. Yeah, I don't know. There was quite a lot throughout the film, and either there were few of them as the film went on, or I just kind of got used to that as the style of the film.
I think there's maybe a difference between a shot being wrong for the story and a shot being just unnecessary. So I think there's a lot of shots in this film that are unnecessary, like they're not necessarily saying anything, but they look very cool. And I don't think that necessarily makes them wrong for the story. I think wrong for the story would mean that they didn't match it in terms of mood, or they didn't match it in terms of the scene and what was happening in the action of the scene. And I can't think of anything that violates the story in that way.
Yeah, I think maybe it's just when a shot is so sort of something so obviously stylistic about it, but not necessarily, and then calling attention to itself, but not necessarily, I don't know, matching the mood or commenting on, you know, the interior feelings of the character, that kind of thing. So, you know, you mean like some of the close-ups, you know, usually a close-up would be to, you know, get us closer to the character and want to, you know, understand what they're feeling. But it didn't feel like it was always doing that. And then like some odd mood shifts. I mean, almost every time him and Gianna were together, it kind of turned into a comedy. Even like scenes, you know, just after a murder, or, you know, when serious stuff was going on, it turned into this like sort of 60s comedy, which was, I mean, I guess it's there to lighten the mood, or, you know, just to give us a few laughs, but it felt a little out of place, or it didn't fit in with the rest of the film. And the music, I enjoyed the music very much, but often the music also didn't quite match what I was seeing on screen.
Yeah. I think this is going to be sort of partly a consequence of just not being very familiar with these genres, because tonal shifts, very common in sort of horror films and stuff. Especially, I mean, not so much this one, I would guess, because this is more of a, you know, of a high quality production. But exploitation films, you get a lot of tonal shifts. Like a lot of the Indonesian horrors that I've been watching, you go from, you know, extreme gory horror to like a musical number to a comedy routine back to extreme gory horror, because, you know, they're catering to what the audience wants, and the audience wants a show, you know. And so you get a lot of this stuff. And like I said last time, I think in the last episode, Wes Craven's The Last House on the Left, you know, very, very brutal horror mixed in with, you know, comedy bumbling policemen, and it's very incongruous. Here, actually, one reason that I prefer this film over a lot of other giallo, or gialli, I guess, is the relationship between the two main characters. Because Argento's films, for me, often feel rather cold, because he's so interested in style. He doesn't have a lot of time for his characters, and his characters just end up being kind of props for him to mutilate. And I felt that in this one, there's a really nice central relationship between those two main characters. I think the English edition, which version did you watch, by the way?
I watched a version. I think it was a longer cut. I don't know how many versions there are, but it would go back and forth between English and Italian, almost randomly. It felt,
Yeah. That's because the English version had a bunch of stuff cut out of it. And a lot of the stuff that was cut out was their relationship. So you lose a little bit of their developing relationship, I think, in the English cut. And then when they made the English cut with the missing scenes, they didn't have a dub for those scenes. So that's why it switches back into Italian. My Blu-ray does the same. I think that their relationship develops quite nicely over the course of the film. I like the sort of the dynamic between them, like the arm wrestling scene where, he's saying, oh, you women, you're just weak. And then, she beats with arm wrestling. And I love her little car that she drives around in with the seat that collapses and the thing that falls down in front of his face, just putting him in his place, in a way that it's kind of undermining that kind of machismo that he's trying to project. And yeah, I thought that worked quite nicely. And it sort of mirrors the, you're assuming that the killer's going to be a man, because in these films it often is a man, and then it turns out it's not. It's the sort of elderly mother, right? So I thought there was some playing with gender roles there, and I thought that was kind of interesting. But yeah, I thought that the relationship between the two and those kind of light-hearted moments, it gives the film some heart, which otherwise, if it didn't have that, it would be like some of the other gialli that I've seen, which are basically a string of murder set pieces with a sort of incomprehensible plot stringing them together.
Yeah, I mean, certainly by the end, I guess I was a little bit more invested in them as characters, and maybe that is owing to those scenes. I mean, like I enjoyed the comedy scenes, but even while feeling like they didn't quite fit in this film, and I think I would appreciate scenes that establish their relationship and who they are as people. I mean, obviously there is a bit of a setup. I think we are meant to think that she could potentially be the killer at one point.
Okay.
Did you get that sense at all?
Not particularly. Wait, at what point?
Yeah. So once I realized that we were meant to know who the killer was, I start thinking, and I'm terrible at figuring out, in murder mysteries, I never guess who the killer is, but I try. And so when I realized it was probably somebody we know, I was just going through, okay, who could it possibly be? Who would be the most surprising for it to be? So I thought of her. I think it's the scene where after he goes into the house and he finds the walled up room, and then he gets hit on the head, and then he wakes up and she's over him, and she obviously pulled him out. And she just has like she has like a funny look. She gives a funny look. I think, we're meant to think maybe possibly she's the killer. But I did, in my notebook, I wrote down a couple times that, it could be Carlo. And it kind of wasn't. It wasn't. It was that he was the final red herring. It was, of course, Martha, which was the name of. Isn't in the Beyond? There's Martha and Arthur.
Yeah.
Okay, so
that's probably not a coincidence. That
probably not a coincidence.
What's interesting, just on an aside, so Argento made the Three Mothers trilogy, which are centered around like three ancient kind of witches and their witchy broods. And Suspiria is one of them, which is the Mater Suspiriatum. And then Inferno is the second one, which is the Mater Tenebraeum, I think. And then Tenebrae is not the third one because they've already used the word Tenebrae. So the third one was the Mother of Tears, which was like 30 years later or something, 2007, I think. But in Japan, this film, Deep Red, was released as Suspiria 2, even though it was made 3 years before Suspiria, and isn't part of. It's a completely different film, and it means that in the Japanese version, in the Japanese continuity, the second mother is Martha Maggioli.
Okay, all right. Yes,
I was going to mention. Sorry, you said the music. You felt it was maybe a little bit out of place.
Just because when there was a killing happening, the music felt kind of quite upbeat and exciting. Yeah, like it didn't feel. It didn't make me think that I was meant to be scared. It made me think I was meant to be like excited. Like, here we go. Like it's almost it's from the killer's perspective.
Yeah, well, again, I think that's the case. I think that's part of the attraction of the giallo, is that you do have this focus on the kills, on the kind of excitement of the kill, of what's happening what's being done to the characters. But again, I think this is just getting used to Euro horror, a lot of the time, the soundtrack is used in a different way from how, you'd see it in American films or whatever. You get things which sound a little bit incongruous, but once you get used to it, once you get into the groove of how these films work, it makes sense, I've got just down here, listeners can't see this, is my signed 50th anniversary re-recording of the Deep Red soundtrack by Claudio Simonetti's Goblin, which is, Claudio Simonetti was one of the members of Goblin, and now he's got his new band, which is Claudio Simonetti's Goblin, who I'm going to go and see live in 2 weeks. But yeah,
I did. I had to pause the movie halfway through to go down for dinner, and I realized on my way down I was humming a melody from the film. Yeah,
that one.
I don't know if it was that one or it might have been another one. There's another one, maybe like a slower, spookier one.
Yeah.
When he goes to the house, might have been that one. But yeah, very, very memorable, very enjoyable music.
Yeah. Goblin did so many of these soundtracks. They did Dawn of the Dead. They did loads of them. Like there's barely an Italian horror that wasn't scored by either Goblin or Fabio Frizzi. But I love Goblin. I think they're fantastic. I've even got some non-soundtrack Goblin albums. That's how much I love Goblin.
Okay. Were they an established band before they started doing these films, or?
Yeah. I think they were. I think they started out in the kind of early 70s, and this soundtrack was the one that kind of made them big soundtrack artists. They continued making soundtracks until quite recently, like Hon no Sono, which is another one of Argento's films from the 2000s. They did the soundtrack for that. And Claudio Simonetti has continued doing soundtracks. I watched a film called Saturnalia, which was a bit of an Argento tribute act the other day from like last year, which has a new Claudio Simonetti soundtrack.
Did they write the music, the children's music? And at one point, a character says, "This song might be a leitmotif of the crime."
That's a good question, actually. I'm not sure. I know exactly the music you mean. The thing is, this particular soundtrack album I can't open because it's numbered and signed. So I've never listened to the whole thing. So I'm not entirely sure. I was going to say, do you remember the little doll that's distracting the guy?
That was the only moment where so again, I mean, you've asked me before with these films, like, was I scared? This is another film where I rarely felt scared. That was the only moment that scared me. Like a robot kid doll suddenly running towards him in the dark. Yep.
Apparently that doll inspired the doll from Saw.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. It's a very influential film, this. Influenced a lot of people. So you are wrong in your advice.
Yes, I totally accept that. Well, yeah,
just like I'm wrong about the squid and the whale. What were some of the things that you did like about it then? You said you kind of enjoyed the soundtrack. Were there any other points that you enjoyed?
I think when he wasn't trying to do like artier, more stylistic stuff with the camera and with the editing, I like the way, like, just ordinary scenes were shot. And and then I like with the kill scenes, obviously those are meant to be more artistic and stylish and edited in a certain way. But I appreciated it then because there seemed much like a clear intention to how he was shooting those.
Yeah.
So I appreciated, his technique and craft in a lot of ways. I guess I was okay with Hemmings by the end. It didn't annoy me too much, and I enjoyed her performance, Jana.
She's great. She's in quite a few films. I think she was actually married to Argento. I think she's Dario Argento's mother.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah.
I believe so.
Huh.
Okay. And she worked on a bunch of other films with Argento.
Yeah. I mean, she's got a great look and a great sort of energy. And I mean, like I said, I like the music. One other thing that I wasn't so sure about was it seemed early on in the film, and maybe it was some of the visual stuff, but maybe also some of the dialogue. It felt like it was trying to be a little Hitchcockian, but especially Vertigo. Like it made me think Vertigo more than any other Hitchcock. And Vertigo is it's way down my list of favorite Hitchcock films.
Okay,
it's like at least half a dozen that I like much more than Vertigo.
It's not so far down, get Vertigo when you look at it.
Yes. But by the end, just as a murder mystery and as a kind of, reveal of the killer, it's obviously we've seen that kind of thing a lot in these types of movies, but I thought it did it as well as anything.
Now it's time to head into the double feature challenge, where we try to identify the points that would make the movies complement each other as an awkward double bill. Okay, so you've been very keen to get to this time, so I'm assuming that you've got something good to say. So, what have you got?
Well, I don't know if I'd set it up like that. Maybe not that I have something good to say, but I think I'm hoping that through our discussion, I can understand both of these films a little bit better. And my main thought when watching, so I watched Deep Red first before rewatching Contempt. And like I said, especially early on, I was making a lot of notes in Deep Red about the camera movement and about how like I was talking about before, like how intentional it felt and why it was doing that and how it was drawing attention to itself. And then I started watching Contempt, and the first thing we see is a camera on a track and the camera looking at us. And, if you think about it, if you kind of take yourself out of the story for a second and think about it, the camera's making very obvious movements. So one thing I was trying to think about, like why it annoyed me in Deep Red, but it didn't annoy me so much in Contempt. Maybe we've talked about that a little bit already, but also it made me think maybe a connection between the two films is this awareness of itself, awareness of both films as a piece of cinema, and also about this idea of, it's a potentially something inherent to all cinema. But I think certain films will try to explore it more or look at it more, which is this idea of, looking and what we're looking at and what we're seeing. Obviously, the camera is directing our gaze in a certain way. There's one thing I did mention that I liked about Deep Red is that thing about, and they play it off well. They play it off very subtle, and it's important. Its importance kind of grows throughout the film when he talks about, the painting that he was sure he saw in the apartment, which then is gone. And so something that he thought he saw, he wasn't sure if he saw it. And I think even Carlo has some kind of line about the importance of it, and he hears Carlo's voice maybe later on. I can't remember what it was. Something about the picture, was it there, or how important is it, or it's all about the painting, or something like that. And then with Contempt, we after that first little opening with the camera, we then get this long lingering shot of Brigitte Bardot lying naked on the bed and commenting on her body. And so just to start things off, very kind of general big picture idea. But I think both films seem to be playing or saying something about, or maybe not even saying something about, just sort of doing it in terms of making us aware of how it's choosing what to show us and what that makes us think about the film.
That's interesting. Do you think that do you think both films are doing it in the same way? Because you said that you thought that Deep Red is kind of making itself, like the camera is making itself known to the audience in some way, but without much purpose behind it. Whereas I would assume you would think in Contempt, there's a lot of purpose behind it. Like the shots are supposed to communicate something specific, whereas in Deep Red, maybe it's just more about the style and trying to make things look interesting and exciting. So even though the camera is, directing our gaze, apart from, the painting, do you think it's maybe doing it in different ways in the two films?
I think so. But again, maybe it's just my prejudice in terms of liking one movie more than the other, or just understanding or being more familiar with one film than the other. I think the way that Contempt does it, it's very, arty, and it's not mainstream at all. It's doing things differently. Like we talked about the scene in the apartment when they're having the long argument. There's a shot where they're in different rooms and the camera is just sort of panning between the two rooms. And even when it's panning between the two rooms, we don't even necessarily see the characters. They're still out of shot. And I think, at the time watching it, I took note of that shot and the camera movement. But again, I guess the other thing to say is, we're watching these films with a lot of intent. We know we're going to talk about them. And, I'm writing down notes. So maybe that's why I was a little, more critical of a film like Deep Red than I normally would be. I'm just watching it just to enjoy it. Yeah, I've never been able, like I was talking about with my, criticism of Iñárritu as well. I've never quite understood why some films give me this feeling of the camera calling attention to it. Like, what's the line about, the camera insists upon itself?
Yeah, Family Guy joke.
Okay, yeah. Whereas other films, it doesn't bother me or I don't notice it so much. Maybe Godard, he moves the camera less in this film.
Yeah.
But even in his other films where the camera's jumping around, it's handheld and all the jump cuts. Yeah, So I don't have much to say. I can't quite figure out what it is about something. I guess maybe like the mood created by Godard's camera movement. For me, it seems to match what's going on in the story. So whatever he's doing with the camera movement and the editing and the blocking in that apartment scene, but also in maybe all the scenes, it creates a mood that seems to fit with what's happening at the time. And maybe in something like Deep Red, I'm just being aware of what to me feels like a mismatch between the whatever feeling the camera movement is giving me and what I feel is happening in the story. That makes sense.
Okay. Yeah, it's interesting. I feel that for me, Deep Red, the camera movements and everything does fit what's happening in the story and does fit the genre, but that's because I'm very familiar with the genre and I know what kinds of practices are common. My sort of thoughts when I was thinking about the double bill was to think about the kind of the central relationship. We got, a central relationship in each of the films. And they kind of develop in opposite ways. In Contempt, it starts with, a couple starting off very close and gradually growing apart. And in Deep Red, it starts with a couple, not a couple, but, starting quite far apart. Like, she takes a photograph and publishes it of him, thus outing him as a witness to the crime. And he sort of reprimands her for it. And then they have the arm wrestling thing. And then as the film goes on, they get closer and closer together and kind of a sort of proto-romance forms between them. So I thought it was interesting in that sense. The two films sort of start from different points with the relationship and move in opposite directions.
I was going to ask you, in Deep Red, are they meant to have slept together at like various points throughout the film?
I don't get the impression that they slept together, no.
There are a few moments where the scene starts and it almost feels like they just, they're getting dressed or something. And even things they say to each other made me think, maybe they're just teasing each other about it or they're kind of playing around. But there were I think there were maybe 2 times where I thought they were heavily implying that they had like just slept together or were about to.
I don't know. I'd have to watch it again, which I'm very happy to see if there were any suggestions of post-coitalism. Yeah. I do think that the film sort of implies that there's a romance developing between them, And I think you can also you can maybe read it not necessarily as a romance, but like a platonic palship. But I think there is supposed to be a romance developing between them.
I feel like there's definitely a romance. Well, she picks up the photo of his ex-girlfriend and throws it in the bin. And I think they're both kind of, trying to play it cool a little bit, but I think they both like each other a lot.
Yeah, which is absurd. She's way out of his league.
Yes. Well, he's David Hemmings, so I don't know why I'm picking on David Hemmings. He's a much more handsome, successful person than I'll ever be, so it's just jealousy. Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. Like I think the relationship is interesting, and even some similarities between Mark, is it Mark or Marcus, and Paul. Yeah, he has that whole, Mark. He has that very kind of sexist tirade when he's talking to her before she beats him in the arm wrestle. And Paul, I think once he realizes his marriage is falling apart, he kind of resorts a little bit to trying to play the traditional man. Slaps her and he grabs her and. It's clear he can't actually control her at all, but he does make an effort to sort of turns kind of petty. So yeah, I totally agree. I think it's a similar thing, but in reverse.
Yeah, it's interesting actually. The slap. So I was interpreting their whole falling apart of their relationship as down to his lack of passion, and then he tries to be passionate and he just ends up being violent, and that's I think that's a mistake a lot of men make.
Yeah, he's an interesting character. He does have those weaknesses, but he also, Fritz Lang seems to like him. So how bad can he be, really? The other connection I thought of was with the music. Like I mentioned, in Deep Red, they talk about the children's song, and somebody just overtly says, "Oh, this is a leitmotif of the crime." And in Contempt, there's that one bit of music that is just played repeatedly. I think it was written for the film. I think it's called Camille is the name of that melody, and it almost seems to come in. In that long argument scene in the middle, it's where it'll just suddenly pop up. It'll be silent, no soundtrack at all, and just suddenly pop up for a bit and then go away.
That actually reminded me of Della Morte Dell'Amore, because it does the same thing. It's got like one bit of music. I don't know, they had one bit of music and they just keep using it over and over again.
Yes.
It reminds me of that.
Yeah, so that was Contempt's leitmotif, maybe of Camille's Contempt. Like I wasn't kind of paying attention too carefully when it suddenly came up. But maybe Godard said just every time her contempt is building up, we'll just play it to let the audience know. It's funny. I mean, a lot of people will talk about John Williams' Star Wars 1977 kind of bringing back the leitmotif as a thing. Each character has their own melody and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, most of the films that we've watched, from the 50s and 60s and 70s are doing the same thing.
It seemed to me like in Contempt, I think for the music to play to sort of Mickey Mouse and emotion, that seems like it'd be a bit too cartoony for Godard. But then maybe it'll be a commentary on cartooniness
on Mickey Mouse. And yeah. The other thing I noticed was her drinking the bottle of Coca-Cola during the argument, which made me think of Late Spring, where they go on the bicycle, right, and the Coca-Cola sign is like a clear kind of sign of American influence. Yeah, I know what you mean. It seemed a little obvious, and maybe he just really liked that bit of music once he heard it.
It's a nice bit of music.
It is a nice bit of music, and it is. I mean, I was saying like with Deep Red, the music not quite matching for me with what was going on. And I think in Contempt too, the use of music, and I mean, you talked about it as like a European kind of stuff. And I think, obviously this is also a European film, also set in Italy. Another connection we didn't talk about, but there's that.
It doesn't feel like they're set in the same place at all, though.
No, that's true.
Like, there's a decade between them, but it feels like a different world. In fact, Contempt feels a lot more like, kind of the Spanish films that I watch, in terms of the way it's filmed and presented and the kinds of scenery you're shown. Yeah,
that's true. I think, it was filmed in Rome, in the Cinecittà studios in Rome, partly, and then actually on the island of Capri. I think Deep Red was meant to take place in Rome. Is that right? Was it set in Rome?
I think so. I saw someone do like a location tour recently, but I never pay attention to that kind of thing.
Okay,
it takes place near that big fountain.
Yes, it's yeah, with the blue bar in the background, which is an impressive set. Yeah, I'm going to Rome in a couple months, and I did find out there is a Deep Red, Profondo Rosso shop, which I think Argento maybe has something to do with, or had something to do with. It's not too far, but it's not too close to my Airbnb. But if I have time, I'll swing by.
Yeah, get me some merch.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think, for me, these films worked quite well together. The central relationship, like you said, yeah, something about what the camera is directing us to look at.
Yeah, we found a few points that stick them together.
So that's the end of our awkward double bill for this episode. Are you a fan of either of these films? Do you now feel tempted to check out the other one? Either way, we'd love to hear from you.
If you have any comments or suggestions for future films, please send them to awkwarddoublebills@gmail.com. You can also follow the show over on Blue Sky at adbpod.bluesky.social.